How are you, Senator? Good to see you.
It's good to see you.
I appreciate you coming and doing this.
My apologies.
During the last few years of his Senate career, North Carolina Republican Senator Richard Burr rarely gave an interview. And it's been years since he's spoken to a TV station. So we weren't really sure what to expect when we met up with him at the historic Monocle restaurant, just a stone's throw away from the U.S. Capitol.
A little avocado. You got a little crab meat?
Crab meat with avocado, yes, sir.
What we found is someone who remains keenly invested in what happens in Congress, but doesn't miss the job.
There's a period of time that you're a contributor. And when you're no longer a contributor, it's time to get out and let somebody else come and do it. And I think my timing was pretty good.
Burr retired in 2022. He's a lifelong Republican, but by the end of his congressional career, he had strained relations with some in his own party. After a decade in the House and 18 years in the Senate, and having come through the pandemic, he said it was time.
Did you enjoy the Senate in your last few years?
I won't say that I enjoyed them the last 2 years. I continued to work. I was getting tired.
A lot of his time in the Senate was focused on health care and issues of national security. He had a critical role on the Senate Intelligence Committee's investigation into Russia's interference in the 2016 presidential election.
It continues from Russia. It's very aggressive from China. And it is overly aggressive from Iran right now.
Burr worked closely with the panel's senior Democrat, Virginia Senator Mark Warner. The committee was praised for its bipartisanship, a word that became synonymous with Burr, especially in the later part of his career. He voted for the bipartisan gun safety law, the infrastructure law, and CHIPS legislation.
You started to get a reputation as sort of a moderate Republican.
I think as we age, we all begin to see things through a different frame. I remember when I voted on a military issue where gay individuals could serve. And my colleagues looked at me and said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "You know, my sons at home said I was crazy. Why would we be against this? They're with that every day of their lives." And I realized that you have to consider the feelings of the next generation and the next generation.
Former President Donald Trump's second impeachment trial ended up isolating Burr from a large part of the Republican Party. The House voted to impeach Trump for inciting the insurrection at the Capitol on January 6.
Mr. Burr, guilty.
Burr was one of just 7 Republican senators who voted against Trump, 10 short of the number needed to convict him.
My vote on the president was not on anything that the House presented. It was on the fact that I thought that the president leaving the vice president without surging to Capitol Hill, a protective detail to take a vice president with a nuclear football and to make him secure, was a breach of office.
Did you tell your colleagues before you voted guilty?
No.
What did they say afterwards?
I think some were shocked. I think some might have voted a different way if I'd have told them. But listen, like I said,
you think some would have voted guilty if you told them before?
Very, very possibly.
After that vote, the North Carolina GOP voted to censor you. You were labeled a rhino, Republican in name only. What was it like behind the scenes? Were you feeling pressure from outside or inside of the Senate?
My wife would tell you it was a sense of relief because I no longer had to travel around the state speaking to Republican groups. I could go sort of do my thing, and that's what I did.
Despite Burr's tense relationship with his party, he still identifies as a Republican, and he plans to vote for Donald Trump in November.
I think some people will be surprised to hear you'll vote for Trump, given that you voted for impeachment. No?
Maybe someone will have a hard time squaring with it. I don't have a hard time squaring with it because I firmly understood why I chose to vote for impeachment. And like I say, that's not a disqualifier as to whether you can serve. It's a bad choice that I thought a president made one time.
Asked if there was a contradiction between planning to vote for Trump and voting to convict him, which would have barred Trump from running again, Burr said his decision to convict wasn't an attempt to disqualify, but rather a response to Trump's actions on January 6. Burr, who still lives in North Carolina but works as a policy advisor for a law firm in D.C., continues to carry the R next to his name. But He's the first to tell you Democrats are needed to get anything done in Congress, a lesson for an institution plagued in division.
I can remember, Reuben, 30 years ago, when I'd come home from Washington, and if somebody asked me what we did that week and I said nothing, they cheered. And now all of a sudden, we're consumed with what Washington hadn't done. And that's a big reversal in 30 years. But it tells us that we've got a lot of work to do, and what America wants us to do is to return to a period where they don't need Washington to do something.
In Washington, Reuben Jones, Spectrum News.